start over?
Yeah, now we're live. You can start over.
Okay.
Thank you so much for everybody that's live stream, as well as everybody that continues to give their input, as well as their valuable suggestions. It will help to ensure that we implement a grant that is evidence-based, as well as focus on the community. The Budget and Grants Committee, occurring on March 20th, 2023 at the CPC office, will come to order at 3:06 p.m. A formal roll call will be conducted. Commissioner Adams.
Present.
Commissioner Ferguson. Present. She's on the phone. Commissioner Kate Kennedy.
Present.
Commissioner Van Leer.
Present.
Commissioner Rodriguez. Present. Commissioner Terry Wong.
Present.
And I do apologize for your name. I use this from the agenda before. Commissioner Zaid.
Present.
A quorum of commissioners needed to conduct business have been met. The next item of business is just doing a quick overview of the guidelines. I think you have a good understanding, but this will be my last time. So basically the purpose is to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to share their ideas, ask questions, and just contribute to the conversation. If we ever have a disagreement or a problem, let's try to offer a solution. And more importantly, let's keep an open mind. Are there any questions about that? Concerns? Okay, so we're going to proceed to the next item. We had a guest speaker, but there was some unfortunate circumstances, so I do not believe that they will be able to be in attendance today. So we're going to proceed forward with overviewing our grant management and making discussion. Overall, there were some suggestions about the types of grants, such as starter, sustainability, operational, and expansion. I think this would be a great time to expand to see if we have any feedback or suggestions about that. So I can yield the floor to Commissioner Adams because I know that he brought this topic up. So if he has any more explanation that he would like to provide, and then maybe we can provide some feedback based on that.
Is that open for me to speak here?
Yes, Commissioner Adams, can you please provide any feedback or clarification that you would like for us to understand, like the starter grant, sustainability, operational, and expansion?
I mean, I think, I just basically put that out there based on the conversation that we were having as a committee last time. But I do think, I can speak about, sort of what my thoughts were, but I was hoping that we would just kind of figure it out together as a group. But I think for me, I think the biggest of the groups, the one that I'm like the least clear on is probably the starter grant. I'm not really sure if that gets defined as something for individuals or organizations that are new. How do we define a starting group? So I'm not really sure about what we want to do with that. And then, just like I said the last time, I think that for me, sustainability would be, I was thinking about what Commissioner Kennedy was concerned about at our last meeting when she discussed that there are groups that are doing good work, but they may need some help with their operational costs, like paying their employees. So I just thought it would be nice to put that out there. And then as far as the expansion grant, this is sort of like something that I was thinking about listening to Commissioner Zaid, because I know that she's open to giving out larger grants. I kind of agree with her on that. And I was thinking that we may be in a situation where there's a group that is doing really good work. They've been doing that work for a really long time, or enough time to show some impact, and we might want to be open to helping that group to continue to do that work throughout other parts of the city. So those are just my thoughts on the different types or categories.
Commissioner Azahi?
Thank you, John. So to speak a little bit to what he's talking about, from my experience in the community working with organizations, I feel like there are tons of organizations in Cleveland doing very good work, but they don't have enough funding to make a substantial impact in the area. So, most of them, the grassroots organizations might go to try to get a $5,000 neighborhood connections grant, but that is not enough to fund the work that they're trying to do. So I think this will be a great opportunity to support them, let them know that we see them, and that and just see what they can really do given the opportunity. I just was spoke with Commissioner Van Leer about this not too long ago, and I think he has really good ideas about how we can support individuals. And we were also speaking about how a lot of times a lot of grassroots organizations are able to take advantage of opportunities due to lack of knowledge of how to get funding in the philanthropy world and things like that. So I think this would be a good example of learning opportunity for them and how they can learn, like we discussed before, maybe doing the clinics. They can learn about the reporting guidelines and how things work. So this could prepare them to, when they, whether they get another round of grants from us or not, the information and the things they hear can inform them enough to where they can go out and get other funding from other organizations or foundations. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to not only support them financially, but educate them on the process of receiving grants in the future. I'm trying to, Pete, did you want to speak to your ideas?
Oh, sure, to the chair. So, yeah, I just was reminded of this over the weekend when I was reading an article about the community Cuyahoga County Arts and Culture and how they grant chunks of money to intermediaries so they can re-grant them to individual artists because the organization itself cannot do that. Or it just struck me as something we might want to consider as a way to, if we really do want to reach, people at the grassroots, individuals who don't have 501c3 status or even know what a fiscal agent is, that might be one way to do it. And I'm not saying we have to do that. It's just like it occurs to me as a way to proceed. That would be a way, like if we were to grant a couple $100,000 or whatever we decided, we would welcome proposals from other entities to do that. And one of your commissioners I had mentioned neighborhood connections as like the kind of organization because they're already engaged in the community in that way. So, that would be an interesting thought.
So I guess a point of clarification is that we'll be working with those entities to try to provide support or recruit individuals. So I guess they're going to apply, then we help them with like educational development. So are we looking to have maybe 5,000? So let's just say grantees that apply with 5,000 to maybe 20,000. These are our starting grants, it seems like. Is that what we're referring to?
I'm referring to, like that idea of the starting grant for individuals or group. The way that the arts and culture, with Cuyahoga County Arts and Culture does it, is that they grant to an intermediary, and that intermediary then request proposals from individual artists, right?
Okay.
So it's just like a way we create an intermediary or middle, in go-between organization that comes to the arts and culture group and says, here's what we're going to do if you grant us X amount of money, and we will handle it this way. So we could invite proposals from organizations like that,
and then they will help
they would
distribute
then
the funding.
figure out who and how precisely, as long as it was, following our guidelines and our in the law, what it says about the 3 areas that we can fund. But it would take some of the burden off of us and allow us to more easily reach individuals in the community. It was just an
Okay.
idea.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it down. And then if we consider that track like accountability and how we would monitor those funds too.
Yeah, and that organization, the intermediate organization, would be responsible for monitoring those individuals, and then they would report back to us on the results that they'd see, something like that.
Commissioner Wong?
So what I'm hearing is that, I mean, I don't think this is necessarily connected to the amount, but it's, the intermediary is necessary as a fiscal sponsor. So if we can identify possible intermediaries, and they can solicit for, help us solicit for the people that don't have the 501c3, that should probably be the target, right? And those, I don't think it necessarily has to be, depending on the scale of the project, you know, that doesn't have to be 5,000 or it could be up. Another alternative, I think, is, I mean, especially for people like artists, right? They should have a more concrete idea of how much their project may take. It's possible that we can start them off with something this year, and then, you know, there could be sustainability once a certain metric is met, that they will be automatically, a certain allotment for next year would be already given to that project. So if it's like a risk to give an individual, they have a grand idea, it's wonderful, but do we want to give them 20,000 right off the bat? It's unproven. You could just test out the waters a little bit. So, and it could be an evolving thing, but I mean, what do you see as like the targets for those individuals? Are they people that, I'm imagining because they don't have the 501c3 status, they might be a little bit green to the nonprofit kind of arena too.
Sure, to the chair. I mean, that I don't have a set idea of it, but yeah, it's people who, I mean, the Cuyahoga County Arts and Culture example is that these are individual artists who don't have any team or staff. It's just these individuals, and we may not want them to just be individuals, but like these group people who have an idea, want to do this good work. There's a way to sort of look at that.
So I'm gonna provide. So what I'm understanding is that that organization will oversee those individuals, it sounds like, and they will be serving as that fiscal agent or that, okay.
That's my idea, correct.
Commissioner Kate?
Couple things. So I love the categorization that Commissioner Adams came up with. I also think I want to make the recommendation, and Commissioner Adams, I'd like to know what you think about this, but I'd like to make the recommendation that we provide those categories as examples, but not requirements. So in other words, like, for example, you could apply for a grant to sustain your organization, and this is what it would look like, right? And we could provide some explanation for like what those boundaries would be, but I just don't want to put any like restrictions on the categories, because we just want to provide funds for what's needed in the community. And then I think to what Commissioner Van Leer was saying, I think his recommendation will help amplify our efforts, because we probably aren't going to be able to reach every single person that needs support. And we do, I mean, comparatively speaking, we do have like a pretty high number of dollars that we need to distribute in a pretty quick fashion. And something like that would help us accelerate that process, and then would actually, it would lessen the amount of oversight that we had to do. So I think it would increase our impact and decrease our time investment.
Commissioner Kelly?
I agree, Commissioner Kennedy. And that was another thing I discussed, was that if we give, not only with the larger amounts of money being given out, support those grassroots organizations on a greater level, but due to the low capacity of our staff, it'll be less oversight for us and less work for the staff of not managing hundreds of grants because they're so small. So, yeah.
Commissioner Wong?
So just as a second thought, maybe we shouldn't even limit it to individuals. If we can get this intermediary to just get the word out, because as Commissioner Van Leer pointed out last time, we may not make it like 15 proposals, right? So we should solicit as many proposals as possible, get these organizations to do a variety. If we just list the types of grants in this general criteria, and then we can always decide how much, right, is allocated to each. But I think it will save us not just maybe for the fiscal sponsorship, but I think we need to get the word out that we have this grant making ability to say. I'm thinking November 30th is pretty soon. So,
So I
and
think,
then I don't know if we need training on, yeah, maybe that intermediary can also give us some training about, fiscal response, what the fiduciary responsibilities we have. I think just a shortcut things. I know that they have a lot of knowledge, a lot of these places, and we have a short turnaround for these grants. So,
do we have any places in mind that we would consider if we decide to move forward with this proposal?
Well, the one that Commissioner Zayed, Neighbor Connection seems like an obvious one. If they're willing, obviously we can't volunteer them, but if they would be interested in serving in that role, there may be others, I don't know. One could imagine CDCs as well.
Yeah, CDC's would be a good.
I do want to mention that maybe we should, the only thing I'm worried about is that these are existing entities that have, like, especially the CDC model. How do we get to the people that have ideas that are not necessarily connected to those existing places? So we'll have to, I don't know if Commissioner Kennedy has some ideas.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I have a recommendation for fiscal sponsors for if we come across individuals that don't have status, and that's Greater Cleveland Neighborhood Centers Association, and that's an introduction that I can make directly. So yeah.
That's a good point. Are there any other fiscal agents that we might want to consider?
I mean, if we want to get a more, because I think Neighborhood Connections is it only park starter grants mostly. If we want to, I know this was potentially a contentious issue last time, but there's the Foundation Center, there's the Cleveland Foundation, because we may need a more holistic view, not just for the smaller grants we need it. We're giving out pretty large grants, and I'm just concerned that we're going to not have enough time to take in all that knowledge. So if we can, maybe if you want to set and maybe a large foundation like that can tell us about other smaller intermediaries.
Same groups. Do you think?
Serve as a fiscal agent?
Or
Or
just
just
a
give us,
person passing out the grants? Don't they give out grants?
They do, but they have a target footprint, so all of their grants has to be within the Buckeye launch. So it would be very targeted, it wouldn't be all of Cleveland. But that's something that we can put on our to-do list, is to explore fiscal agents as well as intermediary centers that would help to serve as those fiscal agents for grassroots or individuals that may not have the capacity yet, or like we stated, starting and still needs that development as well.
Yeah, so my suggestion is to just go to any, we don't have to have them as sign on necessarily as the intermediary fiscal agent, but they might just have a broader scope that they can tell us about possibilities. So if we can set a meeting with them as soon as possible. Or there's also
We just talk to this person who's supposed
Right.
to.
Right, but that's the city, so we can talk to, any entities. I just want us to make sure that, probably the risks of a smaller grant and a larger grant are different. And if Neighborhood Connections has only the starter grants, I don't know if we need to clarify what a starter grant is, because it has been asked. So I think their designation is that it's never had a grant before, right? With Cleveland Foundation or with Neighborhood Connection.
Not necessarily, because a person, like I received one, I could go back and get another one after a year or
Okay.
two. So I would just say we should define what a starter grant is to us. I'm thinking either a smaller amount or one for an individual or organization without the status.
I think it's, probably overlapping in some ways.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just thought of something.
Okay, so Commissioner Kate?
So another thing I just thought of, so usually a fiscal agent will charge a flat rate to basically like manage the finances of the grantee in question. So that's something that we should think about when we're awarding these funds. And I think that's like something we should, cover for the duration of the grant period.
So on the, page 1, Roman numeral 3, under item D, from my knowledge, usually fiscal agents do not charge more than a 10% service fee. So, we did state that fiscal agents can allot up to a 10% service fee, with the grant submission. But for the most case, they do not charge, but there are a few.
They do
because-
charge.
Well, it depends.
They, to keep them sustainable, we should plan on them charging.
So we have that ability.
Right, I think, because this grant money is meant, we should try to find one, even if they have to manage a lot, if for a lesser amount, that as much of the money goes to the community as possible. So there might be ones that would be willing to do pro bono, we don't know until we ask.
Or just a smaller.
Smaller, yeah, 10 seems quite, I know for.
No, 10 is high. In my experience, I've just negotiated a flat rate. Yeah, like $2,500. So that's usually,
2,500?
2,500.
That's a lot.
Still a lot.
To manage
on the grant, I think.
So what that 2,500 would cover is you would be able to use that nonprofit's status. They do all of your accounting and they do all of your banking. So from my perspective, that's an extremely competitive rate.
And how much was your grant? Was it a large amount?
It's just a flat rate for the organization. It's not per grant. It's the flat rate.
So let's just say you get a $5,000 grant, and then we have a flat rate of $2,500. I don't.
Okay, so all right, let me give a hypothetical. Let's say I'm Kate Kennedy and I'm starting a new nonprofit organization that I've never had status before. My nonprofit organization is the Tremont Center for Cats. And so I go to my fiscal agent and I say, I want to start the Tremont Center for Cats. And they'll be like, okay, cool. So they'll do my accounting, my banking, and they'll apply. You have to write the grants, but they will apply for them on your behalf. They negotiate to a $2,500 rate for the year. And it doesn't matter how much money you get, right? So let's say if I get $100,000 from someone who's really into cats, then it doesn't matter because the flat rate that's already been negotiated is $2,500. If I get $5,000, it's
I'm gonna
$2,500.
check in with the phone. Commissioner Adams, do you have anything to say?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say I think these are all really good suggestions. I really like the idea of maybe using the categories as kind of like a framework or some guidelines, but not forcing everyone to fall into one of those categories. So I think that I do like the idea of everyone's talking about sort of structure and how to give people some guidance, but also give them the flexibility, which is what I think we want because we want to, be open to the needs of the community. I like the idea of Terry's idea of finding an organization or organizations that could kind of help guide people who may not be knowledgeable of the process. So I just wanted to say that I know, I'm on the phone, but I'm listening, and I think that these are all really good suggestions.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Ferguson?
Wow, what's going on? I think your phone died.
Your phone died.
No, it's not. It's not.
Commissioner Ferguson, I just want to check in to see if you have any suggestions since you are on the phone. I just wanted to try to get everybody's voice in the room. Commissioner Zaid?
So just for clarity, Commissioner Kennedy, let's just say hypothetically the flat rate was $2,500. Let's say if it's, we give, the center money to help manage your grant, that wouldn't be per individual, that would be flat rate. So if that individual got a $5,000 grant, they would not have to give $2,500 out of their grant. We would provide whatever the flat rate fee is for that organization to manage.
Exactly. So
for this
this one, so this cycle,
No,
so what if an
So it's-
individual applies?
So it's for, this would be like for a fiscal agent. So this would be for a person that does not have status, that wants to access our funds, but isn't allowed to do that because they're an individual and they're not a C3. So the $2,500, or excuse me, the $2,500 covers the whole year. So like think of it as like a membership, right? So you might be a member to something and you might pay an annual fee, right? The $2,500 would be your annual fee, if you will, to use all of these services that the fiscal agent provides, right? Which is a lot. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand it better because it sounds like, especially if we do what Pete suggested, and then we have like neighborhood connections, we might provide them this membership as an incentive to take on individuals that do not. So that's an alternative perspective. I was thinking more that there may be individuals, well, not individuals, but just people applying that may have a fiscal agent. And that's a way to still provide. So I think there's two options, it sounds like. Commissioner Wong.
Well, it sounds like probably to stream, because we want as much money to get to the people. We could have, for example, I'm not saying that this is limiting, Neighborhood Connections handle one particular type of grantee, a small, a certain amount. And then if we can negotiate their fee a little higher up, just to get as many, grantees within one organization, because we don't want to be paying whatever the flat rate for everyone. And then a larger one helps us. I'm not sure, Mr. Goodrich, is there ability for us to do the fiscal stuff? Do we have the ability here to manage some of
No,
it?
we cannot be a fiscal agent. That would mean the city would be their fiscal agent, and the city is not a fiscal agent in that way.
Or so we just have to, negotiate a scale, a deal with them. If it's, say we have 20 small 5,000 grantees, then maybe Neighborhood Connections could manage them for, I think, more than 2,500 a flat fee. So we can put them all, in certain organizations, so we're not paying out these flat fees. Because I also recognize it's not like we don't want to pay this. It is a lot of work, the accounting, but to get as many dollars to the community, if we can find 3 core organizations that can act as fiscal sponsors, but we also need, it sounds like we need fiscal kind of help, not just with people that need the sponsorship. We need, right, the whatever IRS requirements. So we need probably, and we should try to get, an organization that may want to do it pro bono, has the ability to.
Yeah.
So I think just as with the grantees, cast the net wide and find as many intermediaries as possible. Start at the top, start at the bottom, meet somewhere in the middle, and then streamline that. Because I just want to avoid say one person sponsors another one person, right? That may that may not seem like the most efficient use of those funds, especially if it's a $5,000 grant and it's $2,500.
Can I also make a point of clarification here? So the $2,500 for just hypothetically, the $2,500 per year allows that person to fundraise from other organizations. So that $2,500 gives them access to a C3 for the whole year, which means that they can build their organization and get other funds, not just us. So this is like a really basic sustainability thing that we could take care of pretty easily to support them. Now, as for would it be fair to pay $2,500 for Neighborhood Connections to manage 10 grantees? I would say no. I would say they're also a nonprofit organization and it's a lot of work. So I think that this is a pretty low cost thing comparatively, because we do have a lot of money and we're just talking earlier about potentially not having enough applicants, but they can leverage this access to a C3 organization to build their organization and get money from other funders too.
Commissioner Wong.
So it sounds like if we can have one for the people with no fiscal sponsorship, one organization that manages that. It could be one organization that does just the IRS stuff for us, for organizations that do have IRS 501. I guess if so they're responsible for themselves then. If they have 501c3 status,
anyone who has a C3 status is responsible for themselves. So so for example, if I'm a fiscal agent and I'm like writing a check to a vendor, for example, I would say Tremont Center for Cats and then like care of, and then whatever the fiscal agent is. So, yes.
Do we, and then I think I like this other, because I do think from an artistic point of view, that's a very special relationship they have with grantees. Maybe an organization that's focused on more creative endeavors would have. So those are the three. Mr. Goodrich, do we have to, if they have 501c3 status, do we have to do additional stuff on top of that? Do we have to manage, supervise them in any way or submit any documentation?
So I'm, to the chair, I'm a little confused. Are we talking about hiring a fiscal agent to manage all of our individual grantees?
I don't think so. I think we're talking about providing the funds to a grantee to allow them to access a fiscal agent so they could receive our funds.
If we're talking about hiring someone, that would come out of our operating budget. The only way we can do it with grant money is you would have to allow that expense in your grants, right? And then say, and I don't know, we'd have to have a discussion with the ethics office about if we're even allowed to steer them to one fiscal agent, right? So, because there's a lot of fiscal agents out there who would want that money. So like, that's the part that I'm not certain. We'd have to get some legal advice on is are we allowed to choose a fiscal agent and then steer them towards that?
I don't think we should choose it, but I think it's just.
But how do we do
that
that fairly in a competitive world of fiscal agents, right? So if it is profitable to be a fiscal agent, and it may be based on this conversation, right? Do we have an obligation, because it's taxpayer money, to make that competitive to which fiscal agents we steer people to? So that may be a two-step project. Is first, we have to have a competitive process for establishing who the fiscal agents we use are, and then to do the grant separate. So just some thoughts on that.
The grantees should choose who their fiscal agent is.
And then, just for like establishing IRS, I would just say just overseeing the grant process, we can provide assistance. But because I know you said they do IRS accounting and stuff like that. I think the support that we provide should be really focused on ensuring that they submit a successful grant. As an entity or an individual or grassroots, there's some, I think, responsibility on their end. And I think those are things that they will have to pursue more, if that makes sense. And we can provide support, but I don't think we should take on that responsibility. And even when I have my fiscal agents, they did not do those things. There's a lot of things that I undertook, and I worked with my partners that we did on our own. We may have asked questions, but it's important they do their due diligence and do their research as well. Any further comments? Commissioner Wong?
I think the most urgent thing would be to find some type of intermediary for people with no fiscal sponsor, right? The other ones, once they find out about the grants, they can apply for the 501c3 status. And if we, what I would hope is that we would streamline this such that we are not paying out individual fees. And I know that that's a lot of work. And I know there's a matchmaking necessary sometimes. And honestly, I think some of these larger foundations, they may have the resources to help us in a kind of a pro bono way, because the intent is that most of this goes to, and they will have other things, right? Grant making, like kind of tutelage. Intent is to get this out into the community as soon as possible. But I'm just worried that if we don't find an intermediary, we will not even be able to solicit those people without 501c3 status. So if we can put that as a priority to find that intermediary, negotiate a fee maybe based on, like 1 to 10 grantees, this amount of money, that would be good.
To the chair. So my initial concept of the intermediary would be fully funded through the grant process, and they would be applying for a grant, which they would then re-grant. So we wouldn't have to go out and find them. We would just put out a call, and we might have some conversations and make sure people knew that that was an option, but it could be within our grant descriptions, like we would consider funding an intermediary that would then re-grant and support that process and report back to us. So it wouldn't be a separate process, it would be part of our grant making process, the way I envisioned it. But, there's details to be worked out.
Can I ask a question? So how would, theoretically, if I'm a person, I've never had any grants, I don't have a relationship with like kind of an intermediary, how do we serve those people?
Well,
They
I
would
mean,
have to
that
develop a
would, to the
relationship.
chair, that would be part of the intermediary's job to have that outreach into the community. So for example, I hope they're not watching this because they may not have any interest whatsoever, but Neighborhood Connections, like, they already do grant making in the community, they do small grants. So they have that track record. This might be, like, one could imagine, they would say, oh yeah, let's apply for a grant from CPC. We would take that money and have sort of a separate program
Like a
that,
track.
a track that's specifically on the things that the CPC funds and sort of implement that. And then they will report, they already have their channels of communication and community. They have the experience working with basically, people who may not have any experience or grant. I mean, some of those, I think some organizations do apply to them, not just individuals. But it's just, it's a way for us to reach into the community, but it's really entirely part of the grant process. And if nobody wants to do that, take that role, then they wouldn't, but it'd be just
But just
a way to
actually-
expand, one of the options that we would offer in terms of what kind of grants we would give. And it would amplify our reach, and again, take some of that, of the individual kind of burden off of us.
So I'm gonna ask, would anyone like to reach out to just explore to see if they would be interested in this? I think that would help move this conversation forward. Okay.
I do think that we should probably reach out to a larger foundation too, just in case, or the other. I am, and not to sound cynical, I am a little concerned that there is a established ecosystem for this grant making, and there are people probably that are not included in that realm. So if we can try, it seems like maybe we should have like a meet and greet with people, that were just to get people out. Because it's about building trust. Like, someone has to expend a lot of energy putting this down on paper. And I would hate for those good ideas not to be included because they don't have the resources or existing relationships with the nonprofit system. It doesn't have to be, we want, people that have novelty, innovation, and that may occur outside of the system, so the existing system. So I just want to, that's what I'm concerned about, is that if we give it to an intermediary, there were likely, it's just kind of human nature, they're going to give it to the people they have relationships with. What about the other people that are not being served? So if we can have a meet and greet and actually hear what the community, maybe the community has ideas, and we can find one on one of these meet and greets, and we can maybe shepherd them towards a grant.
Okay, so to have a meet and greet to, so explain, like, for the fiscal agents, so they can meet fiscal agents and then they can build a relationship with them if they can hear about our grant process. What do you mean by?
Well, I think to say we have these grants, these are general criteria. What does it mean, restorative justice, all these things. It's a great way to also interact with the community.
So have a
Maybe having
business session.
ideas,
Gotcha.
for us to come directly to them rather than just the intermediary saying, we are the commissioners. This is a great opportunity. And we would encourage you to talk to us with your ideas. Because I really firmly believe, it's when we talk about grassroots, what we should be focused on are the people living in those neighborhoods on a day-to-day basis. They see what's happening. I'm certain they have solutions and ideas to help themselves. And I just want to empower that situation rather than, and we can give them to establish organizations too, but it would be really interesting to see what a layman, an ordinary person can come up with. So, and then of course, it's a great outreach for us.
Commissioner Zai?
I think that's a great idea, Commissioner, but I also think that from my knowledge of working with an organization like that, they have really deep roots and they have a lot of feet on the ground working with different types of people. I do think that a meet and greet would be great. But like they are like, I think someone said, they already like have a reach, and people in the community know that they can go to them for help. Like, little old ladies that want to do a garden know that they can reach out to them. You can't get any more grassroots than that. So I think that, and like we said before, we don't even know if they have the capacity to even manage anything like this, but I think they would at least be able to get us out in the right direction because, like I said, they have feet on the ground. They work with a lot of different people across the city. So organizations similar to that organization similar to them would know like what's going on and maybe possibly guide us in the right direction.
So I'm gonna check in.
Commissioner.
Let me just say this real quick too. And I don't think, no matter who we give the money to, we're not going to give it to them and walk away. We're going to be working with them to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do with the funds. So it's not like, we're going to, I know it's not going to happen under my nose.
I like that.
Commissioner Kate, do you have any comments?
Yeah, commissioners, I totally agree. And also we want to be an area of support, right? So I think like the best funders are the ones who will give you the gift and then introduce you to 5 other people that can maximize that gift. And so I think that, right, because we want to amplify these projects, and the way we amplify these projects is getting these grantees the support they need to do the work that they want to do.
Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, I wanted to say, this conversation reminds me of what me and Commissioner Benito were talking about last week, where she was really concerned about, like Commissioner Zaid said, like not just granting money, but also providing support, and that it would be important that we, for one, just for accountability and just for transparency reasons, it would be nice to have some type of way of providing some additional support, whether it be how, keeping their books or, whatever organizational things they may have. So I think that the idea of intermediaries is a great idea. I just would like to suggest that I think that we could, because I think that what Commissioner Rodriguez said is right. Like, we're kind of going to get stuck. This is almost like a hamster wheel, because we would need to know something about some of these. I mean, we know about the groups, but we would need to know if there's interest in being an intermediary. And so it might be, we may want to consider maybe putting a couple commissioners on the task if they have relationships with these groups or they're aware of them. Or if we want to maybe ask the staff to reach out to these groups, and just building on what we were talking about earlier, this could be another example of like what Commissioner Kennedy suggested, right? Having the types, having the categorization, and then if they have their own person that they feel comfortable working with, then they don't have to use the people that we're suggesting. But there's a lot of talk about making sure that people who, like Commissioner Wong said, about people that are really in the system, right? And so maybe we want to provide the suggestions, and then if people decide that they don't want to use those things, and they don't have to. But I think that could be a good thing. And just to piggyback, I meant to make a point earlier, but we kind of moved past it. In terms of the categories and rewarding money, I am going to err on the side of the possibilities being bigger rather than smaller. So we just said something like a starter grant could be up to $15,000, right? This grant could be up to $25,000, right? Up to $50,000. That means if they need $2,500, we give them $2,500. If they need 5, we give them 5. If they need 10, we can give them 10. I think we can think about, how to design this in a way where we're, one, putting some limits, still giving us the flexibility, and still being able to meet the needs of people in the community who are going to apply for grants.
So I want to echo that, what Commissioner Adams has said. So it sounds like it would be good, even though we have a very active committee, that there are other commissioners that have connections and interests. If we can form a work group that will allow other commissioners to reach out and at least find these possible intermediaries or fiscal agents, or anybody can help. Because I'm still mindful, it is already March, what day is today? March 20th. You know, our original, wasn't it maybe like by April 30th, we would
Well-
release some things? I know we haven't talked about the you know, but we want to give people, because the only types of organizations that it harms are the smaller ones, right? The larger ones have professional grant writers, they can turn over these grants quickly. So I think the sooner we start that outreach and getting for those smaller grants, and it's not, you know, it's, I think even, you know, we have the discretion to, as Ms. Commissioner Adams said, to give smaller amounts, give medium amounts. That's all up to, but again, I'm concerned that will we get enough to cover it? And I would hate to, you know, have it redistributed, or we give someone so much that it's, you know, that it's not responsible, you know, in some ways, that it's more than they need, which is great for them, but when we could have a smaller project out there that could have also served it.
Commissioner
So,
Williams?
Commissioner Wong, would you like to work with maybe Sarah and Shelley to see what these information sessions look like and these community gatherings look like?
Ms. Williams just stepped in, so, just so you're aware. I know if you wanna, give any input or anything, I know you just stepped in.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure where you guys are.
So we were just overall discussing this draft, so I'll give you this draft slide. So overall, we have review, section, well, I should say Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, 3, and then we're up to the funding level. Yeah, so we're up to the funding level. And just a quick recap, some things that we discussed, was just these general eligibilities. We highlighted the importance of nonprofits as well as fiscal agents. So if you have any conversation about that, because I know that you have been meeting with different grant-making entities, and that you may have a rich perspective on that as well as exploring different categories such as the starter grant, sustainability, operational, and expansion. The topic that we were just discussing was about information sessions and really getting the feedback from the groups that are really doing the work and on the grassroots.
So Shelley, hi. So I think one of the issues that we've noticed is that we're a little concerned that we're getting, it's already, 3 months into the process. We want to get a sufficient number of applications and also have that represent a diversity of approaches and large and small organizations, even individuals. So Commissioners, I just suggested that we do some type of outreach, and if you could help us, since you just went through a similar process to find the intermediaries, potential fiscal agents, and also just to get the word out to people that we're looking to fund these opportunities.
One of the things that we could certainly do is do a press release about our new grant making component to the CPC. That is one way that we could certainly get the word out. Of course, posting it on all of our social media outlets and with our partners. And so the persons that I'm partnered with on this project that we're doing, we can have them post on all their social media outlets, have them, spread it through their networks as well. And so I think that once we do it in that kind of manner and then, going around to different meetings and posting it there, we're going to have more than enough people to apply. And I don't know what date you guys are looking to open this up, but the sooner the better, since we're already 3 months into the year.
So
On the 210, like grant management that was proposed by Jason, it was May 15th. So we still have a little bit of time to work out any kinks, as well as get any groups that we need to come and speak and form any partnerships that may be needed.
Commissioner Wong?
So my thought was, I mean, we definitely want to introduce ourselves more formally directly to the community. We could, kill two birds with one stone here and then just introduce the grants. We have these grants. These are the general topics. Sign up, and we'll get some emails, sign up, and we'll send you when it's ready. But start thinking. There might be a person that never thought that they could get a grant and has an idea. So
we can draft that press release. We just did one over the weekend for this project, and I think if we draft, press release and release it to the public, people will then know that this is another avenue that I have. And so Sarah can sit and work with you guys and draft that so that it can be released as soon as possible, and that way people, that's one way of getting it out.
Commissioner Zai?
I really like Commissioner Wong's idea about some information sessions. So maybe we could do weekly or bi-weekly information sessions in the month of April to kind of get the word out. We can invite organizations similar to one I introduced you to in our last meeting, Together We Rise. I know the co-founder of that organization has has a contact list of over 70 grassroots organizations that she can invite, just like Shirley said, just getting the word out to our partners. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I would be willing to give my time to.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I think we should be open to going to them more than expecting people to come during this meeting, or I think you will have more impact going to their meeting or their place.
So if you guys just tell us where it is that maybe you, all five of you, may choose an area that you want to do an information session, and then Sarah and I will set that up.
I hope we open it up to the other commissioners too. If you want to, I don't know, what is the process of establishing a work group? If say Commissioner Benito wants to be involved, or Commissioner Ridgway, not excluding anybody, but we have many commissioners that work in the community, have those connections. It may be good to have someone from the community, the commissioner, to be there at these sessions too.
Executive Director Jason will be able to speak more into that.
Yeah, so just to start, I would recommend, if you're gonna give information sessions, to have your information ready. You guys don't have your information yet, so you're gonna get bombarded with questions you can't answer. So the first step is doing what you're doing, hurrying up and completing your guidelines, so that when you go to the information session, you can let people know, hey, this is what we're looking for, this is who's eligible, this is who's not, these are the amount of money we can give out. That is the purpose of an information session. Otherwise, you're gonna be stuck. People are gonna say, well, all you're gonna be able to say is we have 1.2 million. They say, well, what do you give it for? Well, we don't know exactly yet. Well, how much can I get? We don't know exactly yet. So we wanna make sure before we schedule those information sessions that they're impactful and a good use of our time. So I would suggest working as fast as you can to get the basic criteria done, and then we can do the workshops as you have in your outline already as a suggestion. Now, we can do a press release, and we can even do hey, if you're interested in these future workshops, sign up now. We can do that. That's fine, but I wouldn't recommend doing any in-person engagement yet, because you can't answer the questions that you'll receive most likely.
So are there any further questions about, eligibility, the overall sessions we review, eligibility, our capacity building proposal, and then the funding? It seems like overall we're just gonna allow that to vary. We're going to see if we can create a list of fiscal agent, as well as a partnership with possibly one or two organizations that can serve as fiscal agents. That seems like that's the conclusion of this session.
May I suggest, since we have talked, a lot about this, could somebody, I'm like looking at Pete, but could somebody just summarize all the, let's just put it in a chart, and it'll be easier to read than just like, here are the types of grants, here are the potential fiscal sponsors we want to approach for it, just so we have kind of a roadmap. I think just to put it down on paper, because it seems a little bit, I think we've covered everything, we've spoken about it. And we can change the numbers, but in a more kind of discrete fashion that we can move forward on. Because it just seems like, it would just, I think, be easier to move forward if we have this in a more, a less narrative fashion.
So you're asking for like a list of fiscal agents?
No, I'm saying
Okay,
like, here are the
clarification.
grants, here's the starter grant, here's the sustainability grant, the ranges for them, just put it in a chart fashion. Here are the potential people we want to help, if it's like a fiscal agent or an organization. And then we can divvy up the work and start approaching those people, but just to, echo.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you to lead that task.
Oh,
Yeah, can you lead that task?
That's fine, and just to
And
echo.
probably partner with Commissioner Adams, because I know that was really his idea. So I think to ensure that you're both working collectively on that.
Sure. To echo what Mr. Goodrich says is that, yes, and I think we still need a little more clarification on these 3 topics. If someone else wants to do that, I don't know, Pete, you were, do we need to spell out restorative justice? Do we need to give some examples? If we do some research? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just to the chair, I think that was that the staff was gonna look into some of those things, or what? I feel like the more the staff can do, the better.
So just for clarification of tasks, I have that you're going to meet with Neighborhood Connections.
And any other organizations
Mhm.
that are similar, that might be helpful in the process.
Really exploring that middle, that those that do not have a fiscal agent will pursue. You're going to explore the categories with Commissioner Adams and really narrowify that.
Like a matrix,
Yeah, and
It's easier for us to see what we have. So John, is that okay?
That works for me.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, to the
And
chair, I
we
felt
have-
like there were, oh, sorry.
definitions, clarification of definitions for Jason. What ED Jason, that's what I always say. Did I miss any other tasks?
I was just gonna say, this is I was just thinking about what Commissioner Kennedy spoke of earlier as far as the categories that started, grant sustainability and operational. So did you say you think we should keep those open to other things? How can we word that to where it's more fluid and open so they can use those for other things?
I think they should be framed as suggestions, right? So how they're suggestions and ways that the grantee can frame the application, right? But that it should not be limited to those groups, because we want to keep this as flexible as possible to, 1, meet the need, and 2, make sure that we're getting as many applications as we can, especially with this first year.
Whatever we write, we can also just say, hey, if you don't fit into this box, come talk to us, because there might be another way, that.
I think it should just be a suggestion, because we're not gonna have the capacity to do that, so we should just keep it as open-ended as
Meaning if
possible.
somebody, when we put something down in a chart, it seems very concrete, but this is part of the grant making process. It's not just awarding grants or evaluating grants, but building these relationships and supporting and empowering people that may never have thought that they could receive this type of financial support for their ideas.
Commissioners,
Yeah, I think that's the thing. We just want to make sure those people aren't limited in what they can do. So just, yeah.
Okay, so thank you. So since there's no further questions about those topics.
One more thing, so just like Jason said, we need to have this done as soon as possible. Can we just say maybe we have the guidelines in place, we have the suggestions in place by the end of the week or something like that, so that the staff can begin working on the guidelines and the structure of the grants as soon as possible, so we can get those information sessions going?
So I think this is the guideline. Well,
no, because they can kind of put it in the actual.
The application,
form that
okay.
it needs to be in, so that, it's actually like an actual document.
Like a one
Complete
pager.
document.
okay. Okay, so I guess we can proceed to the grant process and timeline that was reviewed. and send out since, our speakers are not coming. So basically, for application, it states that any proposal meeting the eligibility criteria are encouraged to apply starting May 15th. Applications can be delivered to the CPC office located at 3631 Perkins Ave, Cleveland, Ohio, 44104 on an employment basis. Please contact, we don't know who we're gonna contact to schedule an appointment, or email at cpcgrants@gmail.com. Please use the application checklist to ensure that your application is completed and supporting documents are attached. I know that we mentioned possibly 990 ends to be collected. Is there any other supporting documents that we would like to collect or that we consider?
Shouldn't we get the 990 for the people that we select? Do we need everyone's 990?
No.
Yeah, just.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want all that. We don't want all that.
Also, I have a
So
question.
what about the 500K? Because we did.
Their
say our
budget?
Yeah.
Yeah, they should submit their annual budget.
I'm sorry. I see here that do you guys have an online portal?
No,
for
we,
us to know?
I just put that. Because that was the questions I was gonna ask.
We'll set up logistically whatever we can handle here. So the other thing is a format. We need a clear format, or your grants will be all over the planet Earth, with some people will write 450 pages, some will write one, and it's like you have to have, you have to guide them through a structure of this thing. So that's, if you want to leave the structure up to us, that's fine. I have no problem with that, but let's.
So can we have an online portal?
Yeah, there's most likely a chance we can use a way to do that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So then we can.
We can make it a Google form or whatever Microsoft has or something along those lines. We'll figure it out.
And can we have an option if someone isn't technology savvy?
Yeah,
That at least they can drop it.
always have a hand deliver option, right? But I don't think we should make them all hand delivered because,
Right.
most people can access the computer now, so.
Okay, so we highlighted the portal so that it can be submitted online, because I agree that's our preferred preference. And it can be submitted and compiled into a docket. So the question here was, once it's online, how will we all receive it to be able to review it in an organized fashion? So I see it as like a document where it's all, so this is grant 1 and all their documents, grant 2, all their documents, grant 3, and that it will be scanned in a document and emailed to us so that we will be able to review it. It's going in May. So let's consider that people do various vacations and maybe sick or things like that. So that's why it was 14, but it could be 7 or, and then committee members are allotted. Again, this can be flexible, a certain amount of days to review the grant submissions. A meeting will be called to review, deliberate, score, and vote as a committee using this due diligence form that we will explore more in depth. And then all grant decisions should be finalized by August 31st. I saw Commissioner Said first. Okay, Commissioner Kate.
To the chair, can you clarify within the 14 business days of the grant cycle, like, what exactly do you mean by that?
When it closes, so the deadline that they close is July 1st. So 14 days after that, I believe that the staff will review the portal and then it will be sent to us.
So if the deadline is July 1st, it's just a little, okay. All proposals should be submitted online portal, email delivered, compiled into a scanned docket, and emailed to the budget. So 14 business days or 14 days?
14 business, because I don't want them to work on the weekends.
Yeah. Okay.
And as well as us, I don't want us to work on the weekends either. Have some work-life balance, but to ensure
Yeah.
that we have a timeline and
Oh,
it's
no.
not going, 3.
Definitely not suggesting that anyone works on the weekends. Definitely not. I just want to make sure I understand the process that's outlined here. So, okay, so the staff has 14 business days to send the grants to us. Is that correct? Then we have 14 days to review, deliberate, and score and vote as a committee. Is that
So
right?
I would see 14 days to review the grants on our own.
Uh-huh.
And then after that 14 day, well, on the 15th day, I probably should say, then we need to schedule a meeting. Because some people, I don't know how many they would be, and it would be hard to have a meeting and then just review them
Yeah.
all in that meeting. All in that meeting. Well, hello. All in that meeting, Commissioner Wong. Oh,
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
just a question to the chair, to staff, like what, I would love to see like a process that you all, I mean, you've thought about this, whatever, like how you would manage this and what timelines make sense for you all, and yeah, I'd like to hear more about that.
So to
And
the,
what process the city already uses with grants similar to this.
Yeah, I didn't know it was coming.
And I also wanted to kind of comment after Jason on some of the processes that I'm going through as I'm, doing a lot of grant making for this project. Yeah.
So, I saw your hand first.
yeah, so, to the chair, when it comes to how we deliver it, I mean, if you give us a timeline for that, that's fine. Here, the 14 days won't be a problem, but we have shared drives, so it's gonna be almost instantaneous delivery of these things. How you guys set your rules for how long you review it. The public deliberation is great. But really, before you get to this part, the rubric, you have time on this, right? You can be building this rubric, while we're starting the process. So again, I would say go back to the front of this document and just get your basics done and solidified and agreed to, and then move to the rubric after you say, here's the program criteria, here's this, here's our timeline, we agree, if we're doing May 15th, we agree to that, and then we can get that out while you guys, move to the next step of working on the rubric, right? Because we don't necessarily have to share the rubric with the public. It's helpful if they have the rubric, and we can always put that out, after May as well. But that's what I would say is do your work to get the criteria, and then move to the rubric. So,
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Ms. Williams?
And I was just gonna say, some of the processes that I'm going through now, for example, when I went through the Adams Board, I had to sit with I sat with their president, their executive director, Scott Osicki, and I delivered my presentation to him. I could not go before the board or their committees myself. So my proposal had to cycle through 4 different committees before it was approved by the Adams Board. And I was able to sit and listen to the committees, deliberate on whether or not they wanted to pass it through to the next committee. But I could not advocate for my proposal myself. Someone from the Adams Board had to sit there and present my proposal to the committee in each one of their committees. And then that committee decided whether or not it was going to go to the next level. So I don't know how you want to, and then with, say, Neighbor Up, there's an interview process, right? Mm-hmm. So you sit with, a Zoom call, and you yourself get to advocate for your own proposal and project. Kind of like that one better. But I think that there should be some kind of process by which, how these proposals get cycled through. Do you guys want to cycle them through each committee? Do you want to have interviews with the persons who are presenting their projects to you?
Sounds good. And I'm not sure if you're presenting, you're gonna present today?
Present? No, but I got some, but I have information to share, to bring
Oh.
to you guys.
Sit at the mic.
Okay, so Commissioner Wong.
Oh, I just want to briefly suggest, I personally would prefer maybe on the SharePoint folders
Yeah.
of the 3 topics, and then the grants be put into those instead of one continuous document and then organized by the name. We can talk further about it. I want to clarify that we're scoring this as a committee, but I wonder if it would be also helpful if the entire commission has access to, so if they see something that we missed, there's a check on that. And I like the ideas of the interviews, maybe with the full commission, like if we have semifinalists or finalists, and then we still decide. Because it's always good some people may not be able to fully present their vision in paper, but they would be very good in person and still doing the project. So that was my suggestion.
Okay. I would like to yield the floor to you.
All right, good evening.
Good
Long
evening.
time no see.
I know, right? Okay, so I wanted to make sure that I've been gathering information over the last week and today as well to figure out, or to be able to answer the question, what is the city's grant making process, right? So what are the guidelines that you will have to abide by? And so one of the things that Jason requested on behalf of the commission that the law department has been working on is a formal opinion on some of those guidelines, right? And so still should have that formal opinion really any day now. Was hoping to have that before I came today, but I can at least tell you from the conversations that we're having or that we've had informally is that because 115 is silent as to an actual process, that all other city provisions with respect to contracting, purchasing, et cetera, or just anything dealing with finance would apply, right? So that's generally where it's looking like we're going with that regard. But so I met with Cliff Hill, who's the grants manager for the Department of Finance, and also had some other internal conversations. And so what I ultimately discovered is that the city as a whole does not explicitly have a grant making process. And let me be clear or clarify that. So we seek out a lot of grants, right? And a number of our departments or areas are pass-throughs for grants, right? So we will receive grant money from the federal government, from the Cleveland Foundation or Gun Foundation or whatever entity actually is giving us the money. What generally happens in those situations is that those entities already have their rules and procedures for how that grant is to be administered, and we just kind of follow that, right? So the city in itself doesn't necessarily issue grants of its own money. So as I was starting to have these conversations, I realized, okay, this is something else we gotta create from scratch. So
together.
I know you guys. So this is good. You know, a good template for you guys to start to develop what that process looked like. What we're doing on our end now, as we kind of realize what's happening, is putting together guidelines, not explicit to just grants, but just what are the things that law is going to care about? What are the things that finance is going to care about, just with respect to distributing or allocating money, right? And so some of the things that, and I think I kind of walked in on you guys talking about some of those things, right? So how are you, what's going to be important with respect to the application process? How are you going to promote the opportunities? How are you going to vet the applicants? How are you going to screen? What compliance measures are going to be in place? Evaluation measures are going to be in place. Any reporting out that might need to happen after the fact. So those types of things. Also, whether or not you might want to include a equal opportunity component as well. And then from that point, but there will still be measures in place for just like any other contract though that the city would enter into, right? So it's a little bit less, and again, another reason why Cliff isn't with me here today, because a lot of this falls outside of his role as grants manager. Because again, I think he's focusing more on the grants that we actually seek out rather than ones that we make. And so I think a lot of the questions that we will, or that you guys will have and that we need to answer will be more so specific to general contracting. And so I have a meeting on the books tomorrow. So I just set this up today as I kind of realized that this needs to go a slightly different direction than what I thought or what was anticipated that we would come and do today. So again, that conversation tomorrow and is again with other members in law to figure out what are the things that you will need to know in terms of just giving out money, period. And then there's the other piece, and again, we expect this to be included in the formal opinion, is that is the additional layer of what happens if and when you issue out a grant in excess of $50,000 that will then need council approval in terms of an expenditure that's being made for that much will need to happen. So compiling that information so that we can bring that back to this committee and be a little bit more thorough than I think what we could have been today. So I'll pause there if there's any questions.
So are you saying that we will need the council approval, or are you trying to find out if we will?
No, our sense is that there will be a need for council approval for expenditures made over $50,000.
So if theoretically the council doesn't approve, what is the process to, what happens to the money, right? Because if we have, this seems to prioritize the larger grants, then that there's obviously time that they need to deliberate. And if it doesn't get approved, then we have a lot of money left, potentially on the table. So find either another grantee. It would be good maybe if we can receive some guidance as to reasons or general guidelines as to why they wouldn't approve something, what they are looking for, a checklist that we can, and this information could come from the grantee. It would be a shame if something was just not addressed, that, and just to streamline everything. Because if we are losing, like say 2 grantees at $50K, with $100K that is on the table that's not going to be granted in time. So, and do you know, is it at any meeting that they could take up? Is there a timeline that they need, to look at the grants and then approve it? It's an up or down vote, or?
These are questions I will get answers to.
Thank you.
I was saying that he has, Commissioner Kate?
Just one thing I want to add to the 50K ceiling conversation. So I think it's probably best to assume that there could be quite a few hiccups if there is a council component added to the grant making, and that we relinquish our control to a certain degree by accepting grants higher than 50K, knowing that they're going to ultimately be in council's hands. And that could also compromise our timeline in terms of getting the grants out. So I think that it could potentially be a very messy situation, and we should maybe reconsider some gaps.
So Thomas, just to make sure, so if it's $4,900 or $49,999.99, it will not require council approval?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Commissioner Pete, did you have something?
I'm to the chair, hearing what you're saying, and I get it. I'm concerned that we would say we're not going to get bigger grants just because of this procedural thing. So we need to be thoughtful about that. I mean, I guess we don't want to cede control. On the other hand, if we have projects or ways to do this that are involve a $100,000 grant or something, I would hate for us to just eliminate that possibility entirely just because of this process, even though I get where you're coming from.
To the chair.
So I'm gonna do a quick check. Commissioner Adams?
Yes. So, Delante and I had a conversation about, I've talked to several commissioners about this. my concern with the decision that the law department seems to be leaning toward is that I understand that the charter may not be clear on this, but it does seem to put our independence into jeopardy. So, you know, I'm concerned about that approach because, you know, politicians are politicians, and you know, who's to know that a council person doesn't want money directed in their ward or something? I'm not saying that that's like, I have knowledge of that, but it is a possibility. So with that said, I would like to suggest maybe something like, maybe we don't go as high as 50, maybe we think about some grants that can be renewed after a review or something. But my comment is coming solely off of a concern of us remaining independent from city council.
Commissioner Kate?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And then my concern ultimately is that by incorporating council, that there's a possibility that we just can't keep our promises. And that really concerns me. And I want that to be our priority. And like the last thing I would want is to say like, yes, we approve this grant, and then something happens and it doesn't get approved, and we really like let somebody down.
So I think that in our grant guidelines that we could put a stipulation to make individuals aware that if they want over 50 grand, that they would have to they have to follow this procedure. And I think it will be up to them if they are open, the grantee, if they're open to that. I think, you know, we should do our due diligence. There might be a big project that may make a big impact, and I would hate to exclude that. I would hate to exclude that work. If they're open to going through that procedure, that would be my decision. I mean, I think that should be up to them. Commissioner Wong and then Commissioner Pete.
I have two questions. I think there are ways, maybe, as you said, to, you know, it's not, you know, intentional on our part, but these are the limitations. I do want to ask like a more foundational question. Where was it how did the law department come to this decision? Where in the law did they interpret the 50,000 cap? Is it just because we're a, you know, quasi city entity? And two, would council be willing, if we can prioritize the larger grants, would they be willing to, you know, give feedback? It's not a one-shot deal that they reject something, and that they work with us to make sure a grant can fulfill their guidelines. Yeah, so the first question is like, how did this legal opinion arise?
This is what the city ordinances require as it relates to dollars going out of the city. So expenditures over $50,000 just need to be approved by council. And so with respect to this, it's more so that 115 is silent as to this process. And so without any language that says, hey, this is how this needs to work, then we have to rely on what is there in terms of spending. And so that's where, you know, that's the thinking behind this, is because, you know, this, again, unfortunately, 115 didn't spell out the process, and that wasn't included in the charter language.
Ms. Williams?
So since there is no actual guideline in place, is there some kind of workaround? Maybe city council can, you know, say, hey, because there is nothing structurally or formally in place, we give the CPC's commission, you know, that authority to set the ceiling as high as they want to without having to come through us. Is there some kind of workaround other than going to city council? Because there is a timeline. This is one of the reasons I did not use the city as my fiscal agent. There's a time delay.
So I'll be very clear. I cannot speak for council in terms of, you know, what, you know, I mean, nothing stops the commission from being able to appeal to council and to ask for whatever it wants to ask for. in terms of, caps or leniencies or requests for whatever the case may be. But I can't speak to council. But again, just from a legal standpoint of just interpreting the city's charter as a whole, right? Because we're looking at this as one document. Because kind of I forget who made the point, but and I want to be clear that as it relates to police discipline and being the final authority over police, right? Absolutely, you have your independence that way, but you are a city commission, right? You are a city entity that's bound by the city's charter, outside of and in addition to Section 115, right? So I want to be clear on that point, but to the two questions, actually, to Shelley's and to Terry's questions, I can't speak for council as to what they might be willing to do or allow.
So I think it is fair considering the scheduling, and we have to find out what are to reach some type of consensus with council, get ahead of the issue as to what could make a grant not eligible. And that could be a deliberation, and so we just don't have any surprises. And two, is there any clarity as to what happens to money that is left over? Is there a legal opinion on that at the end by November 30th or whenever?
Generally speaking, money that is not spent reverts back to the general fund, which is what happened with the grant dollars from 2022.
So I guess my next question is, I know you're proposing information. When will we have that? So, because I'm not sure even how to proceed forward, because it sounds like it may be contingent based on the information we receive from the various offices from the city.
So which piece? Because a number of questions that I'm taking down are council questions, right? So, which, I mean, and again, we can do this a number of different ways. So if Jason wants to talk, reach out to contacting council, if you want us to reach out to contacting council, or whether or not we ask a council representative to come to a meeting, right? I mean, I think there's a number of different ways to try to do that, or not sure the best way off the top of my head on how to best get on the council schedule to be able to answer or get answers to especially the council questions. In terms of the administration side of things, the legal side of things, again, I'm hoping to have those answers sooner rather than later. Like I said, we have a meeting set up tomorrow, and now that I have a little bit better of an understanding, of what's needed, that should be a little bit less of an issue.
Wow.
To the chair, is it a full vote of council, or is there a particular committee that deals with this, with the 50,000 expenditure? And what is usually the turnaround for something like that? If we get some examples, it would be very good, even if we have to meet individually with council members, so we can get the ball rolling on this, because I think we probably can proceed with the stipulation is that, there might be the possibility over 50,000, but these are the things that we're working through. Because if that is, and we can see the issue here is that on one hand, it seems a little unequitable to have this barrier of 50,000 and then for the money to be reabsorbed, right? So there's a potential incentive, shall we say, that or disincentive to putting the money out there in the community. I'm not suggesting that council believes that. So then we would need to accelerate the smaller grants, because at 50,000 to 1 million, it's not that many actually. So we would probably have to maximize the medium-sized grants.
So yeah, to the chair, I've been looking at city code, section 108, authorization of contracts. I don't know if this is something that it says that contracts involving any expenditure in excess of $50,000 shall be first authorized and directed by ordinance of council, provided that, but it also says the council may increase the expenditure limit contained in this section above $50,000 by passage of an ordinance receiving 2/3 per vote. So it does sound like there might be a way to increase that limit if council is cooperative, and it seems like it would be finance is where this starts, right?
I don't know.
So, I mean, no, I think if there's a request, I mean, it's a matter of, so essentially everything is done with legislation in terms of interaction with council, right? So it'll be a matter of putting forward some legislation that says, hey, CPC's cap is higher, right? Or we're proposing that be higher, and then that goes to a council vote. But not that necessarily needs to, I mean, finance will always have a part in it, but not.
That proposal could come from this city, I assume, for council.
Correct. It'll come from CPC.
Yeah, from CPC.
Yeah.
Any
Any further
further?
questions? Should we go to the phone? Commissioner Alana? Commissioner Alana? Can you hear me?
Commissioner Alana, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It's a little delayed, so my apologies. I wanted some clarity around the fiscal year and sorry, it's just weird. But the fiscal year and then when that money is spent and how we can get it back.
Not sure I understand the question. So, I mean, the fiscal year runs January 1 through December 31st. Budgets are approved and put forward by April 1st. So money that's not spent by the end of the calendar year is what goes back into the general fund.
So essentially December 31st. So I guess my question is, if we don't spend all this money, is there anything we can do legislative wise or have a conversation with council if that money does not get put back in a general fund? Especially since there's money, that money is promised to us in the charter. So is there a way to keep that money from going back into the general fund if we don't spend it by the end of the calendar year?
I don't want to misspeak. My understanding is that if money that is not spent, and then this is across all city departments, all boards, all commissions, money that is not spent by the end of the year goes back into the general fund. Unless it's earmarked or otherwise already encumbered to go out. So if you already, for example, identify places where it can go, but perhaps the contract isn't done yet or the legislation hasn't happened yet, that may be an opportunity to earmark those funds if there's a way to properly encumber it before the end of the year. But generally speaking, my understanding is by 12/31 or by the end of the year, money that is not spent reverts back to general fund. And that's for everybody across the board.
I guess one of my other concerns, in addition to what Commissioner Garrett Ferguson said, is that, to have the static amount that's consistent every year when would be differing needs depending on the year in the community, differing ideas, seems a little bit, it does, put limits on the effectiveness of actually our ability to relate and work with the community. So, so what you're saying is that is an automatic city, because it wasn't spelled out in 115, the money being returned, that is under the city's charter.
Yes.
And there is either a way to up the cap for that, but there's no way to return the funds in some ways or hold funds that you can see.
If you can identify, so for example, something comes up towards the end of the year, and perhaps process wise, right, it could possibly take longer or to push out before the end of the year, and there could be a way to actually encumber funds, right, because it's unencumbered funds that would roll back into the general fund. But again, you know, nothing is to say that the commission cannot request or ask for dollars to be held. But again, in terms of whether or not that will be approved, I can't speak to that.
Just an additional to the chair. So you said that it could be encumbered. What is the process for that? And it requires council approval in addition? If to hold that fund, you just said that if it's unencumbered, then it returns to the general fund. If it's encumbered, how do we go about doing that? And if you need to send us more information about that, we just like to prepare for every contingency.
No. So I can definitely get more information on it, but generally what we mean by to encumber funds is essentially if there's already some agreement made to it, right? So there's already a, you know, you already figure out where it's going, where the money is going. There's already some agreement in place, right? There's a contract in place or a contract in the works or something along those lines where we've already agreed to pay this money out, right? Or so, for example, sometimes there might be installment contracts, for example, where monies are paid out in installments, and you know perhaps there's still dollars that are a part of that contract. So, for example, maybe there is, hey, the vendor or the potential recipient needs to perform X, Y, and Z tasks before they receive their next installment. Well, maybe that hasn't been done by the end of the year, right? So it doesn't mean that money that was already kind of earmarked and already committed to them would just go away just because they haven't completed, you know, their task yet, right? So it's just that's one example of how those funds are already encumbered because you've already entered into a contract to pay these dollars out. So the dollars not getting out the door, physically out the door by the end of the year, you'd still have access to those at a later date. Is just, you know, one example. But again, the idea, generally speaking, is that there's already an agreement for this money. So what makes it more difficult is getting to the end of the year and say, hey, we actually have no use for, we have not no use, but we actually have no immediate plans for this money. We just want to keep it. That's where it becomes, well, what you gonna do with it?
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you. That was a lot of information, and it was very imperative to help us move forward.
I'm sorry, question to the chair. And then this committee next meets when?
So I think we should, I think it's dependent because it depends on when we receive the information, because we've been working on this document diligently. So I would hate to continue to meet if there's some information that we need from the city and we don't have access. So it seems like we can continue to work on this, but we're missing key information, and it's very hard to make like informed decisions and proceed forward. So my recommendation is once we receive that information to set a meeting, if you plan on having it Friday, but I prefer to have that information ahead of time so we can prepare and read it and have our thoughts and see how to hopefully work in partnership, right? It is my hope that, you know, that the city takes into account that we have spent a lot of time and done our research to try to create a process that is on base practices as well as serving the community, and that's taken into account, and that, you know, it's not a top-down process. So my recommendation would be to meet after we receive that information, or if the next step is to have that training of the contracting. But I yield it to the rest of the committee because that's my thoughts. But
Madam Chair, if I could, so part of that information that we're looking to get back, a lot of it hinges on council answering some of those questions. So how can we get, you know, council's involvement too? So we need from law and from council, and I would like to have all of that information, you know, like together if we could.
And to the chair, I would just say, you have a good proposal from Commissioner Kennedy to bypass council in the interest of getting this money out. It means if you max $50,000, you could get 24 good grants out this year going under that amount, maybe more. So if you involve council, you are inviting a significant time delay. What you really need, bare minimum of information, is who can't we give these grants to under city law, because it's taxpayer money, right? You already know what they're going to say about the ceiling, so you can get to work if you want to. If you want to, if you want to go the complicated route and start trying to work with council now, I don't see that necessary unless you first agree that you absolutely 100% want to go over $50,000, that it's that important to you this year to do so. Then we have an option to work with council to design some legislation to either increase that or figure out what their standards are for what they can deny you. But you do have a fast path to doing what you want independently on the table before you now, with whatever legal guidelines the city puts as criteria.
Commissioner Wong.
So, and we could also hope for the best and prepare for both scenarios, saying that there is a stipulation. But if your grant is approved and it's larger, maybe if you want to design, they certainly are not going to refuse $49,990. So it would just have to be the scope of the project may be different. But I actually think I'm optimistic about this because this will hopefully maximize our ability to do grant making with the small and medium organizations. So maybe this is a slight that's lessening the size. So
Commissioner
Yeah, Chair, I mean, I think thinking about what Commissioner Kennedy proposed, I think it probably might be the best approach. I mean, it says 50,000, so we can go up to 50,000, and we can work on the rest in the future. Like we can start those conversations now for next year or something.
So if a grant, if someone applies that's over 50 grant, we would just reject it for this year, or
We can put in our guidelines 50,000 or less.
So
Or
we
to
give them
say
50, and they have to
maybe-
find
well, if it's
somewhere else.
50, so let's say 49. Let's just say 49, right? So I just want to make sure we're on the same page. If it's over 50, we're going to not approve them this year.
No. We would
Not
give
for
them
more than 50.
Yeah, give them
We've given
50, and then
50.
they have to get the 200,000 somewhere else.
Yeah, maybe we can say, hopefully, if you want 75, just know that there is a possibility
That's
you
what
only
I'm-
give
okay.
50. If you want to design your project around that, or you need to go make sure you get
Seek
another
other
25
funding.
somewhere.
Okay.
We will try our best with council's collaboration to get you the 75 if approved, but we cannot guarantee,
Okay.
right? Because of would that work?
Yes, all we got is 49 for you, right?
Okay.
But you may want to think, but you may want to think about too, right? If you're even going to entertain that, so if you're going to entertain projects that will be, exponentially more than the 50, then you may want to at least consider like, hey, wait a minute, is our 49 going in vain here, right? Can this organization complete whatever it is they're looking to do with the 49, as opposed to just saying, okay, here, we just gonna give you this 49 and then you got to find it elsewhere, right? You may want to think about some.
To the chair, generally, when there is a proposal that has a larger budget than the amount being requested from a specific funder, they have to show where the rest of the money would come from. I mean, that's a good proposal. It won't just say, oh, we'll get that 200,000 over somewhere, but please give us 50. I mean, there needs to be credible. It has to have other sources.
So my point is that you may want to require that, because you'd be surprised who will just come to the table and say,
Yeah, they put a budget,
give me.
says, here's what's your budget for this whole thing, and which parts of it can be funded by $50,000 and what's the rest.
Okay.
So to the chair, to the committee, are there any other questions that I need to get answers to?
Would it help you for us to summarize our questions? I think we'll put it down just so we know exactly what we're asking, so it doesn't go back multiple times.
I think you just wrote them all down.
Did you?
Yeah.
So the questions about rolling over, or about dollars rolling over, possibilities for earmarking funds, who can we not give money to, and then under council specific, those were the reasons why council would deny a grant or deny an expenditure over $50,000. The timeline for that process, the approval processes that need to go to committee versus the full council. Am I missing something?
I think one, we can meet with any person that would be, whether full council or finance committee head.
Okay. So I will, so just so that there's not just kind of, aren't just left with just completely hanging, I will, let's see. I will work to have answers for these by, within a week.
Okay, so it's
4:51, so do we have any last minute questions, concerns at this time?
Chair, I just want, like, what are we tasking?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Alana?
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to get you guys attention. So does this change the capacity of our staff? Because I remember, I think in one of the earlier budget meetings, Executive Director Jason mentioned if we have a lot of small grants, that might be hard for our staff to manage and us. So I just wanted to know, does this change the capacity if we have to cap it at 49,000?
To the chair, we'll make, if we, if 25 is, that means a maximum of 25 grants, we'll have to make it work. I mean, you're talking about giving out a lot of small grants based on the conversation today possibly too, so you're adding to that number. So you just have to keep that in mind when you look at these proposals, because I don't have a hard number of what we can handle yet. This is the first time we're doing it. So next year I'll be able to firmly answer that was, easy or it was exceptionally hard on us. So, but this year I would just ask that you keep it in mind when you're looking at these, the number of approvals you have.
So the chair, in response to that, the idea of an intermediary that applied for a $50,000 grant and then proceeded to, distribute it, re-grant it, as we had discussed, that's still off the table.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right, especially because we're doing I would say under 45, just to make sure that we're not meeting that 50 threshold, because I know we did discuss maybe if the possibility of giving them a little something extra if needed, but that was the last conversation.
I'm not sure, point of clarification, I'm not sure I understand if the limit is 50, why would we go lower?
Because it would be 49.99. Right, so once you hit 50, so my understanding, once you hit 50, then you would have to do it.
right.
What I just read in the law, if I'm reading the right section, it said $50,000.00. So that's, you could ask for $50,000, but we'll get clarification on that.
Right, didn't you answer that already?
Well, that's,
$49,999 or whatever, 99 cents, who cares? But
so it sounds like at 50.
At 50.
This,
Yeah.
the
So
law
if you
just
apply
said
50,
excess of $50,000,
So,
which
okay.
means $50,000. But whatever, we can figure that out.
so if a grant applies for 50, it sounds like they have to go to council. That's what was
So-
answered. What she asked the question.
So wait, what's the question?
is it 50 or is it $49,999 and potentially 99 cents?
Oh, sorry. In excess of $50,000. So $50,000
She
in 1
asked the
cent
question and that's
needs
how
to
it
go
is.
to council.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay,
To the chair, there was a question on the floor about what our staff tasked with. The only thing that I have a task note here is clarification of the definitions for the categories we can give. So coming up with that, that's the only thing. So if there's more tasks, feel free to send them our way in writing or whatever.
Yeah, I would love for us to think about how, like right now, saying what can the staff do in the next week or two that will help us move this forward? Because I feel like we have documents and like if there's something that the staff can flesh out in terms of the process and take in what we've said or, whatever makes sense from our perspective and what staff can, how you can help us, that would be super welcome from my perspective.
Certainly getting the word out about, there are grants coming.
So you're gonna enter a press release?
So we will do that and, however else we can work together on marketing that there will be grants available from us coming soon.
And then I can touch base with Ms. I guess if you guys want to discuss the structure more, we can touch base, because I know we started to touch base about the different meetings that you're going to. We had a brief discussion, and that might help to flush it out too. Maybe, is there any interest in that? Would anybody else like to work on really establishing that structure? Because what's down is just a draft, and we can further fine tune it as well as provide any feedback.
So Chair, I guess the question I have is who is going to be fine tuning this and how does that process work? Because I thought maybe staff could help with that, but if it's more of a committee thing, I mean,
I think that's definitely a job.
I think it could be a combination.
Well, John and I were already gonna do
Yeah.
the charge.
So I guess to follow with the task, I guess that's the question. Jason has the definition. Commissioner Zaid was following up with neighborhood connections and creating a list of different intermediate. And then I guess I'll follow up with Ms. Williams and help work with structure. And if there's any other commissioner that would like to fine tune that process, feel free.
Commissioner Wong, you look like you're.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, I think we just have to proceed with the 50,000 cap. I think whatever numbers are easy to change, but if we can have, I think that's sounds like a good division of labor. Is there any other moving part that we need? Because once we have those, Shelley, once we have, I think, the general information, then I think we can do the outreach, whether it's by ward and then we probably have plenty of commissioners that want to help out with that.
Jason?
I guess the point of clarification that seems to be what I'm taking away is who's the keeper of the document we're creating with the guidelines? So are you continuing to do that as the chair? Because this is the draft that we're working from, right? And who is charged with making the edits to this? So is the staff creating this and sending it back to you? Or are you going to continue to take feedback from different portions and create it and resend it?
So I would say that my suggestion would be, it would be dependent on each role. So for example, the different categories, I don't think that the staff would be able to implement to enter that. I think it would be based on their information that they provide for us.
I think that we should give the information to staff and they should continue to edit the document as we give them our suggestions.
I agree.
So, okay, do you guys have the document? The last draft was under P, and I'm not sure if it's on OneDrive. I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. Is that on OneDrive so that they have the ability to edit it?
No, I think it's
We'll
just
get it
a
from you.
Okay, it's 4:59. We can send a doodle for the next meeting. It seems that since we selected that 50 cap, that we really do not need as much information from the city. Any other business? The meeting will be adjourned at 4:59 p.m.
Well, I have to leave them.
No,
Could we set a meeting?
No, you don't have to vote, but I think you have to move. Did you want to start a meeting?
no. I said the meeting can be done by doodle.
I am to adjourn.
I second that.
Pete, Adriana, y'all still ain't picked up your checks yet.
Okay.
I'm going, she got a picture on Thursday and then do it.
They went both and passed today. They let me know that literally as I was on my way over here. I couldn't take
So
them
what-
for you,
Hey,
but
madam?
they're gonna